Bubba Wallace here from 2311 Racing. Funny thing about being fast, you end up waiting a lot. First to show up, first in line, then just waiting. Me, I rev up Chumba Casino. With over 200 social casino games, no slow lanes here. Why sit around when you can spin? I'm already racing. Your turn. Play for free at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to ParaTruth.
What's going on, ParaTruthers? Welcome to a brand new episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And tonight, prepare to be disturbed as we uncover chilling accounts of demonic possession from around the world. From exorcisms gone wrong to unsettling rituals that just will drive you crazy. This journey will reveal a dark side of humanity's belief in the supernatural. Now, something that fascinates me is in today's day and age, everybody associates demonic possession with the religion of Christianity. And I feel that it has a lot to do with the Catholic faith and them doing the exorcisms that they do. However,
I actually think it has more to do with pop culture and using
that could be too. Yeah.
Various movies.
Yeah. But it actually goes back a very, very long way. I mean, we're going back to almost prehistory in the world of demonic possession. A little bit about it. In ancient civilizations, demonic possession was a widespread belief, often linked to illness, misfortune, and mental instability, meaning they believe demons caused those things. Across various cultures, from Mesopotamia to ancient Greece, people attributed their afflictions to malevolent spirits or demons entering a person's body. This belief led to the development of exorcism rituals and practices aimed at expelling these entities. Now, in ancient Mesopotamia, it was believed that demons cause a wide range of ailments, both physical and psychological. They utilize incantations, prayers to gods, and rituals involving the destruction of demon effigies to combat these entities. I'm assuming there must have been effigies in the location of the person that was being possessed, or maybe they created the effigies just to destroy them to get the demon out. It doesn't really tell you that part. Priests and healers, known as Ashipu, were responsible for identifying and expelling demons, often drawing on knowledge from various fields like medicine and philosophy. In ancient Greece, the concept of daemons existed, or demons. I believe that's where the word demon kind of originates from, is ancient Greek, which could be both benevolent and malevolent. These daemons were often linked to psychological states and inner forces, not just external spirits. And exorcism practices, while present, might have focused on addressing internal imbalances rather than solely on external demon expulsion. There's other cultures that went through demonic possession rituals. Ancient Persia, with figures like Zoroaster. I think Zoroaster also had beliefs about demonic possession and developed exorcism practices. Actually, ancient Egyptians had cases of this as well, where priests performed rituals to ward off evil spirits. Even regions like Bali, demonic spirits are still believed to exist and are hunted annually.
Which is kind of weird. How do you hunting demons annually? It's just all get your
I have kind of read on the practices in Bali. Can I recall them right now? No, I didn't write them down, but yeah, I have seen it, and it's kind of interesting. But it's in today's day and age, I mean, Christianity still does exorcisms. However, to hunt a demon, that's just different.
Do you think the name isn't? I mean, it might be Zoroaster. I think it's Zoroaster.
Okay, that's one that I've never seen before. So, religious beliefs heavily influence how possession narratives are constructed, understood, and responded to across cultures, of course. And I believe, regardless, your religion plays into what you think of as demons as well. Identity of the possessing agent. In most cultures, the possessing entities are often identified based on the prevailing religious beliefs, such as spirits of deceased individuals, deities, animals, or devils. I feel in today's day and age, it's a little bit less of the individuals, deities, and animals, and more so honing in on devils and demons. But I could be completely wrong on that.
I mean, again, that's just, it's still culturally. So, well, obviously, in what over here is obviously primarily demons. When you're looking in various third world countries and areas of Africa, Indonesia, etc., we're starting to get into other entities that would potentially be malevolent or capable of possessing people, or even just oppressing individuals.
Right. So in Sri Lanka, the cultures there are influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism. Possessing spirits might be identified as Hindu gods or indigenous deities. In Islamic tradition, possessing entities are commonly identified as jinn, and I want to say we've done a episode on the jinn, but jinn are basically inhabiting a parallel world to humans and are made of light and fire. But I believe they look very much like humans visually, if I remember correctly.
I think it depends on the stories, because they also have the ability to form or take a form as they will. Not entirely a shapeshift, but they could take on human like forms. They tend to, as I said, appear as light or fire. I mean, typically when I hear of stories about the jinn, they manifest as like kind of like this pillar of fire in a way. So it's not really like a particular form. It's just this almost fire and smoke like entity that kind of appears. Doesn't necessarily burn or anything like that. It's just their appearance. Which again, when you consider all the various entities out there that you just kind of went over, there is various beliefs that state all these entities are one and the same being, but they manifest in a certain way based on the culture's belief system. So jinn may still very well be the Christian demon and vice versa. Likewise, these Hindu gods may just be, again, some demon, whether it be Christian or otherwise, that is manifesting as a Hindu god in order to associate better with the individuals in that culture. People understand it. The last thing, of course, we Christian, at least in the Christian doctrine, what demons want to do or don't want to do is let you believe that they're even there. Their goal is not to let humans know that they exist, because if they exist, then that strikes fear, and fear leads to wanting relief or release. And they know that if there's a demon alive, there's probably something much greater, and it has to be God. So, that there's like a whole structure that goes into demonic possessions in particular, and that's aside from the oppressions and afflictions and all that, which happen outside of the human conscience and body, whereas possession tends to be within.
Right. Something that I kind of struggled with looking at this information is the interpretation and content of the experiences. And I don't know if there's any cases where in different cultures, different religions, where you can do like in Christianity and get to supposedly getting the demon's name in order to exorcise it. I know that that's more of a Catholic thing, because in most Christianity, you don't even need the name for an exorcism, right?
Well, I wouldn't even say it's Christianity. It's unbiblical to claim that you need a demon's name in order to cast it out. There's no substance within the scriptures that say we need to know that. There's only been one case in which a demon willingly gave up its name, and it wasn't even really a full name. They just called themselves Legion.
Right.
But Jesus never asked for a name. None of the other disciples, when casting out spirits, ever asked for names. So it is highly specifically a Catholic doctrine that has been passed down through various branches of Christianity. And it's also something that's been taken into account in many pop culture movies. So it's kind of a misunderstanding. It's a belief system that isn't necessarily entirely accurate. But that's not to say there aren't people out there who can get the name of a demon and use it. The belief is when you have the demon's name, you kind of have control. You have power over it, basically. Now, whether or not that's true, I can't say for sure. I've cast out demons without knowing names. And I know plenty of people who have. So it's really just down to the individual. If you feel like you need that, you need to try to get the name, I think, it is what it is. And if not, then you go about it regardless. But again, yeah, I think a lot of what we know about demonic possession in general is highly based on pop culture, just because of the movies that have been rolling out since the 70s and the 80s. Demons are very much designed in movies to kind of strike terror, as they should. There is a very strong reason why demons were accounted for in the Gospels. These are something that we really need to focus on and be concerned about as individuals living here on earth. Now, does that mean that demons are going to be, nipping at our toes and our heels and everything every step of our way? Maybe, maybe not. But the idea of possession, the actual fact that demons can possess, roughly translates to about 1% of all true cases. Many cases, as we'll talk about in a little while here, tend to have a more scientific background to it, and maybe isn't necessarily possession, but that's something that has to be discerned between two various parties that work together.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, religious beliefs kind of shape the narrative for possession cases on both us as individuals and as communities, and how we understand and attribute meaning to the symptoms and experiences associated with possession. The content of a person's experiences during possession, like speaking in different languages or having supernatural strength, can be interpreted through the lens of their religious framework. Again, this kind of goes with pulp culture over necessarily Christian belief, but an example of this is in Christianity, someone who's possessed does have kind of supernatural strength, which might be seen as evidence of demonic influence, and barking back biblical accounts.
Oh, in that, it really depends on the level of possession.
Yeah.
I have talked to foreign missionaries who overseas had encountered various demonic possessions, and I have been told the stories in which they're praying over an individual, and this individual is laying on their mat in this little hut, tent, whatever, straight as a board, just arms to their side, legs straight out, laying on their back, and all of a sudden, without moving a single limb, they just swing up, kind of like you would see Dracula rising up from his coffin, right? They said it's absolutely incredible and kind of crazy to witness, because there's no reasonable explanation for it, no scientific explanation for it. It can't be done by the human body, which would suggest some sort of spiritual force then being able to manipulate the person's body. And when it comes to speaking different languages, you really have to consider, and this is where you maybe have a educator there to understand better or know the person's background in language, especially because if someone's speaking the language that they don't know, that they've never in their life have studied, it's really interesting, right? Like that's odd. Most of us, like, I can't speak Italian, I can't speak Spanish, I can't speak anything but English.
You can barely speak English most of the time.
100%. If I'm suddenly out of nowhere speaking in another language, or even more so speaking in tongues, which is a very different thing. This is speaking in tongues is basically a spiritual language, a language of the angels. Basically, it can't really be interpreted by humans. But with that said, regardless, if somebody does not have that education and yet they're capable of speaking it fluently, whatever it is, then that's an indication that maybe there's something more happening that is beyond a scientific explanation. Now, yes, science can still kind of break it down and say, well, this is something that was kind of locked away in their mind from watching some movie or whatever, and it released in this moment where their mind is kind of like free, I guess. But again, that's where you have multiple individuals. It shouldn't be like when you're doing an exorcism, you typically want someone who is obviously an exorcist, a practitioner who can be there and do the exorcism, but you also want someone who's medically advanced, who can understand the symptoms that they're going through, be aware of what's happening. Because mind you, we've talked about this in past episodes in which demonic possessions end up in the death or result in the death of the individual because of the crazy amount of ways that some of these exorcists try to cast out demons, making them drink various liquids that are poisonous, or burying their head into water and they drown, stuff like that. So having somebody on standby, a medical practitioner who can keep an eye, check pulse rates, make sure everything seems well with the human body, is important when actually doing a exorcism in itself. And it doesn't, of course, it certainly helps, at least. It doesn't hurt to have someone who has a scientific mind there as well. They may not believe in the whole thing, but having someone there who can at least do the initial study case and see, hey, maybe this person just has schizophrenia, maybe this, maybe that, and you work. It's why you don't typically go in and just do an exorcism the day you learn that someone is supposedly possessed. You have to learn his background work.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's not just clergy that do that. There have been mothers that have done that to their kids, make them drink bleach because they think they're possessed. And it's rather disgusting. I mean, even more so from a religious person who should know better. However, there are those that think that they're doing the right thing in doing that. I mean, I shouldn't say that because mothers should know. So help-seeking behaviors and rituals. Religion influences the types of help people seek and the rituals they engage in to address perceived possession. In many cultures, individuals might first consult religious healers, undergo exorcism ceremonies, or engage in practices specific to their religious traditions before seeking other forms of help, such as psychiatric services. However, like Eric said, I feel that should be a working hand-in-hand situation, not just going one over the other before you go to the next one. I feel you should have a psychiatric evaluation before you even consider demonic possession.
Right. And this is something that, you have to tread lightly and very carefully.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, it does depend entirely on the individual's belief systems. If they don't believe in medicine and they believe they can only be healed through faith and prayer, well, then that's most likely what they're going to do. They're not going to go seek medical attention. There are plenty of people who have risked various diseases, cancers, and just refuse to get medical treatment because they believe if their faith is strong enough, they'll be healed.
Mm-hmm.
In rare cases, it's true and they're healed. And in others, they're not. They die. Now, that's not to say that God isn't faithful. It's just part of the plan of what happened. But I think it's important. Like, I know plenty of individuals Christians in particular, who don't believe in medicine. I believe God created individuals to create medicine and help people uh, fight illness and get better. And, God doesn't want us all dying because, we're neglecting our health. That's actually, he speaks against it throughout scripture, that we should be taking care of our bodies. But yeah, it's true. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, when you think maybe, you know, someone is possessed, or maybe someone that believes that they are possessed, there's nothing wrong with getting clergy, getting Christian friends, family, etc., to start praying for that individual, whether it be a possession or health symptoms or whatever. They should be praying. Meanwhile, that person should first go seek medical attention and see what is said, especially psychiatric help, depending on, of course, the symptoms. And then once you exhaust all those options and maybe medication doesn't work or whatever, or you don't want to take medication, then you resort to the exorcism. It's always best to do it that way first, because on the flip side, if you're doing an exorcism first and there's something wrong medically, there's a good chance that things could get worse.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, I mean, there are so many psychological disorders that would make you think or feel somebody is possessed, or even mimic some of the things that we would call possession or even oppression. Disassociation or dissociative disorder involves a disruption of a person's normal integration of consciousness, memory, identity, emotion, perception, and behaviors. Dissociative disorders, including DID, dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder, can involve individuals feeling as though they have other identities or entities present in their selves, influencing their thoughts, behaviors, and actions. A lot of the time, the identity or personality will take hold of the body, supposedly, and will make people act the way that they wouldn't normally be acting.
Well, if I can throw in an example here from personal experience, this is very personal. This is just somebody I know. This is me, who has obsessive compulsive disorder, typically diagnosed for years now. I have thoughts that I can't control. They're intrusive thoughts is what they're known as. And most people have intrusive thoughts to some extent, but typically people are able to have that thought and then immediately just discard it. Like, that's not a real thought. That's fake. That's not going to happen. Whereas I, lacking a certain filter within my mind, which I have to take medication for, once I latch onto that thought, I have that negative thought, I replay that thought over and over, and I actually start to believe that thought is going to happen. That whatever it is, death to somebody, harm of some sort, illness, etc. And because I start believing that it's going to happen, I start to fall into compulsions. This could be like switching lights on and off, or washing my hands a bunch of times, making weird noises or tics, contorting various limbs or whatever to try to get my mind off of these things. And so from that standpoint, knowing for a fact that I do have obsessive compulsive disorder, there are plenty of people around who might see me out in public and be like, there's something off here. Like, I don't control my thoughts. I can't. It's not easy. And as a result, I tend to, because of the contorting, because of washing and stuff, I kind of lose control. It's as if somebody else has possession of my body. I don't want to do these things, and yet I keep on doing them. It's a vicious circle. So that is one thing in particular that has to be considered when you have these mental disorders, when you have any disorder whatsoever that can either change your mind or, create various thoughts or thought patterns and even various movements. Is that a demonic entity, or is that just a disorder that needs to be, worked out through medication, which, mind you, for OCD isn't the best option, or through basically just, I forget what's it called. It's, I forget the name of it, but it's basically like when you have a thought, you just deal with that thought. You don't give in to any of the compulsions that come with it. Something exposure. in which you just basically sit through it. You feel all the anxiety, you feel all the stress because of that thought, but you don't try to relieve it whatsoever. And eventually that thought and that anxiety, that all that will dissipate over the course of the next couple hours, usually.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that almost feels like a controlled exposure to whatever is making you tick.
Yeah, something
that's
like
probably not. It's probably not the exact term, but other types of disorders like trance states and suggestibility, ritualized trance states where individuals entered altered states of consciousness, as common in various cultures and religions throughout the world. And sometimes these can be reached through, we'll just say, medicinal ways. Within these contexts, suggestibility and willingness to enact the role of a possessed individual can contribute to the experience, similar to being hypnotized. So the power of suggestion basically is what this is talking about. And that is a very dangerous thing, even with hypnosis. I mean, somebody, if you're susceptible to hypnosis anyways, could suggest to you that you're possessed by a demon or that you're somebody else altogether.
I mean, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're in that, I don't mean this in a negative way, but if you're someone who's kind of gullible, you don't need to be hypnotized to kind of
that's true too.
their ideas. People could just kind of start manifesting them and just saying things, even just in passing. Like, they might not directly say, "Oh, maybe you're possessed," and be like, "Well, what if?" And that starts to eat at you. You start to think about that over, and then you start to wonder, like, "Wait a minute, what if I am?" And so suddenly you're manifesting your own possession. And there have been the various cases in which that has literally been the thing. People have this idea, they're led by certain individuals to believe they're possessed, and they start to act like it. And in the end, they end up getting medical treatment because the exorcisms don't work. And after the medical treatment, they're able to kind of get away from it. They're able to heal and move forward with their lives. That's not always the case. Sometimes it actually is a demonic possession. But again, when you consider 1% of all demonic cases, possession cases are actually demonic possession cases, well, that's a very, 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 very low number of cases per year.
Yeah. And pop culture would try to make you think that demonic oppression or possession is a more common thing. And I'm not saying that it can't be. However, there are so much other things out there outside of demons that can cause these things to happen.
Well, and again, it depends culturally where you live. Like here in America, demons ain't possessing us because we're already long gone, most of us. Right? You don't need to bother. We're already so far way down the drain. It's amazing when you have things like television, radio, just media in general. You're constantly feeding yourself with these things. You're not doing anything. Like the main thing when it comes to this reason demonic possession is a rare thing. Again, demons don't want you to know they exist. And so typically they're in the background pulling strings. There is a great book called The Screwtape Letters. Fantastic story by C.S. Lewis. And it kind of delves deep. I mean, obviously it's just a story. It's a fictional story, but I think it's inspired by God because it kind of really tells you or shows you how demons work in the background of people's lives. They're not there to possess. They're there to guide and misdirect individuals from getting too close or reaching the gates of heaven. If you guys haven't read that book or you're interested at all in kind of learning that, Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis is phenomenal. It's a pretty short read. And I guarantee that once you pick it up and start reading it, you'll be done pretty quick. Not because it sucks, but because it's really good and you'll fly through it. But yeah, so that's one thing I think a lot of people, myself included at times, need to realize. Like what we see in movies and TV is just that, movies and TV. It's all fictional. Demons work in a very different way. And I don't mean just, I say demons because that's how I know them. But whether, jinn or Hindu gods or you name it, whatever evil entities, they all work the same way.
Right.
And that's a fact. You can literally look through history, religious texts, and see that the demons themselves tend to all work very similarly in most cases.
Right. Yeah. Now, there are other situations like psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia and severe depression, which will kind of make you think or feel that you're possessed or oppressed. Same thing outside people thinking that that is going on for you. And I know that severe depression can also be a symptom of demonic oppression or possession as well. That is a really hard one to differentiate unless it's psychologically evaluated and they're like, you're just sad about a lot of stuff. You're fine.
Severe depression is an interesting one because not only can it be created by demonic activity, but severe depression can also invite demonic activity or negative activity I think is a better term here. Because not all oppression could be by, quote unquote demons. We'll say negative energies or entities. And I know that's a very broad term. And the word entity is a very broad term, but you guys know what I mean. And so when we fall into this place where we're really depressed, and this is just a normal thing that we're living with, you can easily invite these energies in because depression creates a negative aura around you and around us, right? And so when that happens, maybe we don't mean to, but a lot of people, for whatever reason, when they're sad, when they're depressed, what do? They watch sad movies. They play sad music. They do everything they can to feel that, which isn't a bad thing, mind you. It's probably
because for most people, it might break you out of it.
Right. However, if you're like me, you do everything in your power to avoid the feeling, which is also not a good thing.
Right.
But the idea is, you create this kind of energy source that invites these other entities or energies from outside within your home, in your space. And suddenly you get all these things drawing energy off of you, psychic vampires in a way, not the legit psychic vampires that we've talked about them, but in this case, a spiritual vampire that is able to draw energy.
Yeah. Another form of psychological situations that can be causing this is hallucinations, where you're having auditory and visual hallucinations, and that can be a part of possession experiences, especially within a religious context. For example, some individuals with schizophrenia may experience religious delusions, including beliefs of being possessed by demons or controlled by external entities. And Eris kind of already brought that part up, where it will make you feel like that. However, it's not always the case. The majority of the case, we'll say.
And that's a tough one, because it's like when you have a disorder like that, like, are you really just manifesting it yourself mentally, or is there actually something there? And so there's a lot more work that has to go into it to actually be able to figure that out. And that's where you get the psychiatric help from. That's where you get a prayer team. And if you need to, bring someone in who's strong enough who can help exorcise this entity or whatever it is and help to understand what's really going on.
Well, and we will say this before we get through the whole science behind all of it, is that it can be both as well. You can have a psychological disorder or issues.
Or better.
And demons or negative entities can be playing on that and causing things to be much worse because of the fact.
Right.
But I mean, there's several other things that can be contributing to what people think themselves are being demonically possessed, or people outside thinking that person is possessed or influenced in some way.
There is a very, I was about to say fine line, but there's actually a pretty thick line in most cases between what is demonic and what is simply an accident or normal life. I have seen and heard stories and know of people who, they'll be walking barefoot and stub their toe and they'll blame it on the devil. Legit, not just for, giggles, but legit will blame it on the devil, or they slip down a set of stairs and they'll claim the devil pushed them. And obviously whether or not that's true, I don't know. But chances are that life tends to be rough and we will constantly fall victim to various things, typically not so bad things. But we have to be wary of what those things, of what we attribute those things to, because if you're constantly saying, well, the devil this, the devil that, well, not only are you possibly inviting that entity, you're knocking on the door, right? At that point, you're like, hey,
well, yeah,
I'm here. Come on. But you're also
that you believe, and yeah,
right. But then you're also crying wolf. So then if something does really happen spiritually in a very negative fashion, and you go looking for help, people are going to be like, well, this is just you. This is how you handle it. Like,
yeah,
everything's a devil.
Right. So there's some neurological explanations. Epilepsy, which can cause seizures, would make it look like somebody's possessed because they are flailing around without any reason. So we'll quote unquote that reason. But there are some cases of epilepsy where they don't go into a seizure at all. They're just staring off into space. Like they're not even there, 100% not even there. Involuntary movement, like I said, and unusual sensory experiences that cause the seizures, such as flashing lights and stuff like that. Brain abnormalities can cause issues with the brain to make it look or even make that person feel like they are possessed, and in reality it's something like a tumor pressing on the brain, something that's cutting off blood flow to a certain area of the brain. Neurochemical and brain activity changes. This is something that kind of resonates with me because when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with depression and a very slight thing of OCD. And they're like, oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. Take these drugs, you'll be fine. And I mean, Eric can speak to that as well, even more so than me. But a lot of those times, the neurochemical and brain activity changes, taking the medication can almost make you feel like you're possessed or make somebody think that you're possessed because you're not acting in the way that you did before.
Well, beyond that, another example, also from personal experience. So several months ago, I had started a new medication for myself. Now, mind you, there's no actual medication that basically works against OCD. Nothing that actually helps with that. So instead, they put you on antidepressants primarily, or anti-anxieties medications. So they put me on technically an anti-anxiety. It was a pretty low dose, something I've had before, had no effect. So they bumped it by double. And when that happened over the next 2 months, it took like 2 weeks for it to kick in, But then over the next 2 months, I was not myself. And in fact, there were so many times where I would lose time. Like I would be sitting, on my couch or driving, and I would just lose track of where I am and what's happening. And then I'll snap to it and realize like, oh, wait, here I am, and I'm like, well, what happened? And that could be very scary at times for people who maybe don't understand the effects of medications as such. When you start to have time slips and you start to not remember things that you just did 2 minutes ago, if you're having conversations, like I would have conversations, and in the middle of speaking, I would forget. My entire thought process would just wipe out and I would go silent. And it was weird, right? People were like, well, what, you okay? I'm like, sorry, I don't remember what I was saying. And that happened for 2 months. And that's very scary. And many people can attribute that to believing there's something taking over, something that's wiping your mind clean, something that's hiding or pulling you back and, hiding you from time. And you get these missed things. That's common in demonic possession, by the way, is this idea of missing time. Mm-hmm. Same thing with, alien abductions, which, going back to Unholy Communion and the discussions we've had, maybe they're one and the same. I don't know. But it's definitely possible with these medications to misinterpret what's truly happening within the brain, and instead accounted for something spiritual when in reality it's not.
Right. So last thing that can kind of, from a scientific perspective, or at least psychological perspective, that can cause people to believe that they're possessed or someone is possessed, is an autoimmune attack on brain receptors, such as the NMDA receptors, that can lead to symptoms similar to those associated with purported demonic possession, including psychosis-like behaviors. Something that can make it fall into different things is like cultural context. The interpretation and understanding of possession experiences are heavily influenced by cultural and religious beliefs. And what is considered a spiritual experience in one culture might be viewed as a medical condition in another. Like Eric said earlier, between the US and then basically everywhere else the US might consider it something different. I mean, I will say we are very closely related to Canada. They might have similar beliefs than other parts of the world, but and then, you know, differential diagnoses. Although one doctor will say you're fine, get a second opinion. There will be somebody that will see something that the other person didn't, and then even get a third opinion, because what did they say? If it's at least 3, it's not a coincidence anymore.
That.
Yeah. So definitely make sure you're getting checked out by a doctor. And like Eric said, there's no reason why you can't be checked out by a doctor and consult a clergy, a religious leader, whatever. But don't just jump to possession.
With that said, I do want to add, if you happen, regardless of what you decide, you know, if you happen to be dealing with demonic possession, you think, and you're listening to the show, always have control of yourself. You know, take control, know who you are and what your beliefs are. The reason I say that is because there are medical practitioners and there are spiritual faith healers, practitioners, believers, etc., who both will tell you one thing and hold you to it. And they'll say, this is demonic possession. This is what it is. It's demonic possession. No doctors. And the doctors say, no, you're very much just, you know, mentally you need help. Psychiatrically you need help. It has nothing to do with demons. Demons don't exist, etc., etc. So now you have these two people trying to keep you in one bubble, and that could be very dangerous as well. So with that said, when somebody is jumping from one to the other and they're kind of getting all the basis, keep control of yourself, have control of the situation so that nobody drags you from one side to another. Get a well-rounded opinion and be open-minded. Because again, you know, I stand in the middle. It very well could be demonic entities. It very well could be psychological. So just, there are people who will just simply, you know, they'll go one place and they'll get sucked right into the whirlwind.
Right. Well, we had a guest on not too long ago that even said, find a psychiatrist who's well-rounded, who will even consider the unworldly things that might be causing this.
You'd be amazed at how many psychologists and psychiatrists are actually pretty open-minded. You know, all of my psychiatrists that I've worked with, I promise I'm not too crazy.
You always sound crazy to me.
I know. They've never been religious, but they've always held an open mind to my personal beliefs, you know? And so even when talking, you know, they'll always want to say, well, what if it's this instead of, you know, something spiritual? And I'll be like, yeah, I mean, that's possible, right? But then on the flip side, I might say, oh, well, it's, you know, something psychological. And they'll be like, eventually after they got to know me, well, what if it's this? And it's actually a spiritual thing. You know, they may not believe it, but they're typically open to helping you, the individual. And that's what's most important. Someone who has to be willing to understand your belief system and what you're going through, not trying to just simply change a belief system.
Right.
Unless the belief system is very unhealthy. Yes, let's add that. There are a lot of very unhealthy belief systems out there.
So, and you can put this just in your own opinion. What role does possession narratives play on mental illness, trauma, and stress? Whether it's causing us to believe that we are or that it actually is happening.
I mean, that's a tough one. I looked over this note earlier and I got stuck in this part in particular. I was like, how do I answer that question? Like that's, so when you're exploring the role though of mental illness, trauma, and stress, one thing that is very, very important, and I've said this multiple times over the course of our show, is you should consider one, therapy is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I will not sit here and say this is something you should do because I have not done therapy. I refuse to. It's just me. But I
don't therapy and I feel it doesn't work. So,
and I know people who do it on the regular and they are a new person. So it just depends on the individual. Give it a try. On the flip side, if you're someone like me, then shadow work. Shadow work is great. There's plenty of prompts that you can look up online. And it allows you to really dig deep into your history, your past, the way you grew up, the way you view things. So getting to better understand your differences, your mental illnesses, your, whatever you're going through, your traumas, things that trigger you. Once you get to learn why you're triggered the way that you are, you can better understand how to adapt and fight against those triggers, fight against the stress, fight against the trauma. And, I think that's the best way to kind of shape your view and understanding of possession, because in many cases, the majority of the things that we witness or we go through on a daily basis isn't due to possession. Yes, there may be some oppression happening in the background, strings being pulled, but we still have the full opportunity to have control of our own lives. And I think it really does start with getting to know yourself. And then if something happens, once you know yourself, that seems off, well, maybe there's a cue there. Maybe there's something you need to look a little deeper into or get some help discerning.
Yeah. Well, I actually 100% agree with that. I can't really add anything in my opinion, because it's one of those things that I think it's kind of cut and dry in the sense that you need to be knocking down both doors before you decide one way or the other what you're thinking is happening. What are some of the limitations that the scientific explanations for possession experiences lack?
The limitations are simply when they've all been exercised and explained, and yet there's still the actual attacks happening in the possession itself, right? There are individuals who will say that science is God and it's the only way. And in fact, many scientists believe that. They believe, that science is a God in a way that, themselves basically. And likewise, there are plenty of spiritual people who believe the same thing. They just don't believe in science. And sadly, what they don't realize or recognize is that both science and religion grew up together. Science was originally created by the religious. They worked hand in hand. And then eventually they kind of split off and went their separate directions, creating this divide. So there are things that science simply cannot explain. And for me personally, who had gone through demonic oppression for 3 months back in 2007, 2008, I can tell you that there is no explanation as to why my bed would sink while I was just laying there in bed, like not asleep. I could feel someone sit down on it. I could feel someone brush my hair. I heard a growl right there, a huff and a growl right at the side of my bed, like it was some sort of dog-like thing. I saw giant shadows. I was not on drugs. I was not drinking. I was a very, very level-headed individual. It made no sense that I would witness the things that I witnessed. And it wasn't until after I turned to God and was born again that all that stuff ceased, which tells me that something very spiritual happened. Now people can come in and say, well, maybe it was all psychological. Maybe you're just witnessing, the things that you were seeing, or maybe you were just feeling like the bed was sinking. Maybe you were just feeling like your hair was brushed. Maybe you were just hearing that there was something growling on the side of your bed. But again, you can't really prove that without taking the time to study it and replicate the results. And that is something that science can't always do when it comes to possession, because demons are smart and they will hide because they don't want to be noted.
I will say this, that science would say that the fact that you started believing that God was protecting you and I shouldn't say take the wheel, protecting for you, looking out for you, and helping these things to cease. Your belief changed your psychological situation where you changed that. I'm not saying that is the case, but that's what science would say.
Right.
And I feel that there is a lot that can't be explained, like you said. And on top of that, there are plenty of things such as quantum physics that we'll just say normal, quote unquote, scientists will say is just nonsense. That quantum physics is a neoscience, basically. And honestly, quantum science is becoming more and more prevalent today. So I'll have you go over the impact of demonic possession.
Sure. So basically, the belief in demonic possession, while of course varying across cultures and religious contexts, can actually have significant social and even psychological impacts on both individuals and, of course, the communities around them. Obviously, anything we believe is going to affect those who know us, right? Friends, family, etc. So there are some things to consider when it comes to psychological impacts, of course. The first is that symptoms may be mimicking mental illness. So behaviors attributed to demonic possession, for example, in this case especially, often overlap with various symptoms of other mental health disorders like psychosis or dissociative disorder and personality disorders. Another one is a misdiagnosis and delayed treatment. Individuals who basically believe they are possessed or whose communities hold such beliefs may delay or forgo professional mental health treatment, potentially worsening their conditions. And this is something that I stated earlier, we've stated in the past, like you have to get some medical, at least an examination, get a view from both sides, because things can get worse if it is indeed, scientifically explained, or mental disorder in this case, right? Another one is various trauma and distresses. Various experiences in particular attributed to possession, including the behaviors associated with it, exorcism attempts, social consequences, can basically be profoundly traumatic and distressing for individuals, especially if they're the ones going through it. We know individuals who've experienced it and it's been traumatic for them, who've experienced it secondhand or thirdhand. But people who actually go through it, it's much more difficult. And then there's, of course, the stigma and isolation, because the belief in possession, especially when linked to sin or moral failing, can lead to stigmatization, isolation, and shame, according to NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health. And of course, if you're a religious person in particular, even if you're not, my bet is you probably have shared some sort of guilt or have had some sort of guilt over the years. And that stuff could weigh on you quite a bit. But when it comes to religious individuals, especially, if you commit a sin that you are trying your best not to commit, you can end up in a pretty tough place at times. Especially when you don't understand the true grace of God and his ultimate forgiveness. Finally, of course, there is heightened suggestibility and vulnerability, which in individuals experiencing psychological distress or in a state of crisis may be more susceptible to suggestion, and the beliefs surrounding possession can shape their experiences and behaviors. And again, I have witnessed this semi firsthand, kind of secondhand, but an individual that I knew for a very long time. She struggled very deeply with depression, and everything that haunted her, everything that like bothered her, would eat at her from the inside out, basically. And she would become kind of not herself. She would kind of disassociate. She would start self harming herself, causing mutilation to her arms and her legs and things like that, you know. And this was a very much medically diagnosed, and it was handled. Handled sounds really harsh. Like, yeah, we just took her to the pen and, you know, put her out of her misery. But no, she was, you know, medically diagnosed with depression, anxiety, um, and eventually alcoholism. And they're able to help her out. And she was able to, get, you know, help and was cured from such things.
Hmm.
So, sorry for the long pause. Looking at our time and then looking at all the stuff we have to say. Lots.
Well, I was gonna say we've kind of discussed a lot of this stuff already, so we can absolutely go to, you know, what the future of demonic possession
For sure.
kind of looks like.
They're all riding hoverboards and driving cars to go to the future.
Dude, demons are just running all over the place. You know, it's been an ongoing debate for years about demonic possession. Is it real, even type of situation? And the nature of demonic possession. Do you think that if, putting a huge if there, science and religion came together, we would be able to explain it better?
I mean, I can't say that that's the case because in a way science and religion already has in that case, because we have a lot of paranormal investigators who will go in with exorcists. They will do a preliminary investigation and also maybe do recordings and camera work while the exorcism is taking place. And there are, you know, things that align when it comes to the spiritual aspect of possession. Now, when we're talking about mainstream science, worldview science versus, you know, spiritualism, I think it has to be married again in order for everything to align in terms of understanding both the physical and the spiritual realms. Now, of course, that means having to think outside the box, which from what we were told recently, not much, but a couple of episodes ago, that most scientists actually tend to be very open-minded when it comes to the spiritual realm. And in fact, they will study things and come to believe in the spiritual realm. Maybe they don't believe in God. Maybe they don't necessarily believe in whatever various religions, but they start to believe in a spiritual realm because there are things that just keep pointing to something that doesn't quite add up, you know? And this is basically something that has to do with creation. The fact that there's more to humanity, more to life than just the physical elements of it. So I think that is very important. And I do think that if they were to come back together at some point, and in some cases, maybe they do, you would not only be able to better understand the existence and the nature of demonic possession, but I think it would become very problematic for the entities themselves who tend to possess or oppress, because now not only are they acknowledged, but now they're being studied, which means they can't hide as much.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Something that is, I'm going to skip over the next dot because it's kind of all ties together here. Something that I've actually struggled with as far as trying to figure out if certain entities are coming around because of, we are in a technological society now. Information can be looked up, whether it's true or false, and people buy into it. Has that helped in creating more fear in both demonic possession and causing people that have mental disability or mental disorders to believe that they're possessed? Do you think that has had a huge effect on it, or
we can easily go back to so many times we've talked about the Slender Man, right? Massive
Right.
area. Technology has the ability to share stories in a very widespread out atmosphere, right? So this is not just a couple people learning about it. It is millions of people learning about these various things, whether it be an entity, whether it be how to, like, what a possession is, or how do demons possess, or how to exercise it, whatever. There is generally a fear factor because people, let's just consider any medical condition, right? Let's say, I don't know, your lower back is hurting in a specific spot, and you look it up online. Why is my lower back hurting? And there's a list of things like, oh, it could be, you know,
I have cancer.
it could be Disney. Yeah, Disney. It could be Disney. It's probably Disney. That's why your lower back's hurting. Yes, it could be.
I don't know how many times I've been watching Disney. I'm like, oh, my back.
But in those cases, like, you're looking up online, and of course, it's everything from, oh, here's the most likely cause, but then here's the worst, and then the bottom says you're dead. By the time you finish reading this, sorry, goodbye. Let's say your goodbyes, right? So,
oh, you're actually dead. That's why your back's hurting.
yeah. So it's like, you just been laying in the coffin wrong this whole time. With that said, like, technology, because it's so advanced, because stories can get out information, and more so that much of this information doesn't align with much of the other information out there, right? You can look up a number of different websites and get vastly different results. And so you're kind of forced to kind of like create your own opinion ultimately. And that is very problematic because then you don't really know what the truth is, especially when we're talking about demonic possession. And of course, if you're reading about demonic possession, you start saying, oh, wait, this is just like what I see. Oh, this is just like what I feel. Oh, this is just what I hear. Boom. Suddenly you think you're possessed, and you're in a really crazy kind of state because you think you're being watched at all hours of the night. And think you're going to be dragged out of your bed because there are movies that like to do that, which typically isn't the case, but it can happen, I suppose. But yeah, it's dangerous territory, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We, like you said, we've talked about it, both Slender Man and any of these different entities, really. But Slender Man is probably the primary because it was just literally a picture put up on what was it called?
Creepypasta.
I knew it was pasta. I'm like, it's not spaghetti. What is it?
Carbonara, fettuccine pasta. No, what is in here? That.
But that's why I bring it up because it's one of those things that even if it wasn't an entity when that was created, it is now because so many people have been so worried about it.
Right.
And the story that it came with that thing.
Right. And I know you skipped over this, but I wouldn't actually backtrack because I kind of do want to mention it a little bit here. But discussing how modern society continues to grapple with the complexities of possession experiences, I do want to say that it's the problem we have modern times regarding demonic possession is the amount of divide between people and their beliefs. We have people in the far extreme that think everything is demons. We have people in the far extreme that think there's no such thing as spiritual anything. We're just humans. We're here. We live. We die. Right. And there's really the modern ground isn't all that common. Online, thankfully, we have like Facebook and we have this podcast and many other podcasts on this network with us who have brought together people literally from around the globe who are able to talk about this stuff and share their experiences. And so there is some connectivity there. But the simple fact is that people tend to be more afraid to share their belief regarding demonic possession because they're likely going to be ridiculed by somebody. And that's a hard pill to swallow at times because people, they're very stubborn. They're very opinionated. They want to say you're wrong. Spirits don't exist. Devils don't exist. You're basically an idiot. And likewise, vice versa. There are plenty of people out there who are very much spiritual and they'll say, oh, you don't think this exists? Well, you're an idiot. And so it's just a back and forth. And I think that's the biggest issue with the modern society right now. We just can't fully grasp and therefore come to the full realization of what's really hiding in the shadows. And I think that's important because these belief systems have been around nearly as long as humanity has been. And that has, to me, that says something.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with anything that you just said. So, any final thoughts about demonic possession, or even just feeling like you are?
Um, I mean, just, first and foremost, treat everything, like a grain of salt. Don't freak out. Don't lose your mind over stuff. Do your research, ask friends, ask family, ask whoever that you need to, whether it be seeking psychological help or seeking help from a church, or whatever, whatever your belief system is. Take the time to get to understand it. Possession, again, is only typically 1% of any and all demonic cases that come up. And even when possession happens, it's typically pretty low key. There's like small moments that it happens, right? And then you're free of it for a bit. In most cases, of course, it gets worse, and it can get worse. And this is much more rare nowadays. But with that said, the biggest thing to keep in mind is keeping your cool. Stay level headed. Keep control of the situation and your life. Don't let others push you or sway you one or the other. And keep it all in prayer.
I will add, don't be looking up information. Talk to a seasoned professional, both scientific and religious, before you're jumping to any conclusion as well, or deciding what you need to do. Because as Eric mentioned, there's so much out there that you're just going to jump to one specific conclusion and your mind's already made up.
Right. With that said, jumping off of what Justin said, we're going to do this all night now, just back and forth. What Justin said, I see it over and over again in various Facebook groups that I'm on, primarily paranormal groups, where someone will type in something that's happening and ask their opinions. And what do they get? Dozens, hundreds, thousands in some cases of opinions. Not only is that a lot to go through, but they are all very much varying, opinions.
Diversified,
very
as well as trolls.
So it is very important to have an inner circle of people that you can trust with your belief system and what you're going through. And if that is something that is not easy, you can always reach out to us, because we are very open-minded and very much on the spiritual norm with a very skeptical mind at the same time. So, we're good peoples, I'd like to think. So if you need any opinions or thoughts about anything you're experiencing, maybe we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, we've got a lot of great things coming up for you guys. We got Brian and Jen Byers from Savannah, Georgia coming on with us. I mentioned them last week. And it's going to be a great conversation, because it's going to be coming from both a religious, and both of them are psychics as well. They come from both perspectives, so it'll be an interesting conversation. We've had Brian on in the past, so it'll be just kind of a refresher for listeners that have been listening to us from the very beginning. But make sure you like, share, subscribe, no matter where you're listening to. We're always looking for new people to hear what we have to say, and hear the information we're giving as well. And as always, we try and make sure that you come to your own conclusion. If you don't believe everything that we're talking about, do some research, talk to people like we just said, and reach out to us. We would love to hear your opinion as well. Again, this has been a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. Make sure you're checking out all the shows that are on this network, because there's so many great ones out there. Until next week, where you will find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.